The Kansas City Chiefs are gearing up to take on the Buffalo Bills for the second time this season, and this time, not quite for all of the marbles, but for a good deal of the marbles. The next game would be all of the marbles, or at least most of the marbles, but a lot of marbles in the AFC Championship game. Real quick, guys, I have 6 notes on what the Kansas City Chiefs have to know in order to get the win this time, because last time it was not a win. So, real quick, if you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting a like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other Kansas City Chiefs fans. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, the Kansas City Chiefs are the only thing I cover on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week. I'm nearing 2 years consecutive of daily uploads, at least daily uploads. So consider hitting a subscribe button, stick around for more. The number one note going into this game is simple. Xavier Worthy. If you remember that first game, the first time around, Xavier Worthy was absolutely destroying the Bills in the first quarter. And then he disappeared. I think his final reception was like 12 seconds into the second quarter, something like that. Then he disappeared. He even had one of those notorious Xavier catches the bomb out of bounds plays. Here's what this says to me. And I know I'm going to be called a conspiracy theorist. I know people are going to say that I'm an idiot. People are going to say that I just don't know football. That's fine. Maybe I don't know football. I know strategy. And strategy says that the Kansas City Chiefs, especially by the time in the season that they played the Bills, were pretty sure they were going to have to see the Buffalo Bills again. And so, not everything was going to be put on the table. The first time around, Xavier Worthy was absolutely eating that Bills defense's lunch. He was putting their head in the toilet and flushing. He was putting sand in their pockets. Any bully maneuver you want to talk about, that was it. And he almost had, I think it was like a 60-yard touchdown as well, had he just been able to keep his feet in bounds. If he were 8 inches closer to the center of the field, he could have caught that pass and turned upfield. He was wide open on it, by the way. Early in the first quarter, there was a lot of motions with Xavier Worthy that got him unique looks against defenders. In my opinion, some of Xavier Worthy's worth was pocketed in order to have it moving forward. Remember, I think the big idea at the beginning of the season was that, the game against the Ravens was a playoff game. Week 1, but it was a playoff game. Absolutely, they knew they were going to see the Ravens again. But the score was such that it had to be won. Because at that point in the season, you didn't know you were going to go so many games. You were going to go 9-0. Was it 9-0 before the defeat to the Bills? You didn't know you were going to have that run, so you had to have the win against the Ravens because you had to have that game over the Ravens. By the time you played the Buffalo Bills, you knew you were going to see them again. You did not have to get the win. Against the Ravens, Xavier Worthy was kind of used all over the place. You had him running. You had him receiving. You had him a couple shots downfield. You had him in the short receiving game. Versus the Bills, you saw what you saw in the first quarter, and I think Andy Reid put him in his back pocket. Xavier Worthy, should he have, and he has emerged since that game. That was a massive confidence builder for Xavier Worthy, that game against the Buffalo Bills. Should he go forward from that, I think the Chiefs will build on that game, the beginning of that game, and he will be an absolute dynamic piece against the Buffalo Bills this time. A smaller note appended to this, Noah Gray had a sneaky good game against the Bills. He didn't have a whole lot of receiving yards, but he had some crucial first downs, and he had 2 touchdown receptions. Noah Gray and Xavier Worthy are not going to be the primary focus for that Bills defense, and it might be because of that those 2 guys are very, very dangerous in the AFC Championship game and could be deciding factors in the win. Next, we have to talk about our friend Najee Johnson. That's right. He did not have a very good game. You may have guessed. Najee Johnson, the last time these two teams played, was targeted 7 times, yielding 6 receptions for 89 yards and a touchdown. That was good for a 158.3 passer rating when targeted. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the passer rating statistic, 158.3 is perfect. It doesn't get better than that. Najee Johnson yielded a perfect passer rating on the day. But when you dig a little bit deeper on Josh Allen's numbers in general on that day, Josh Allen had a passer rating of 83.5, meaning that Josh Allen's passer rating nearly doubled whenever it was that he targeted Najee Johnson. And against Najee Johnson was where he threw his only touchdown of the day. Now, it is unlikely that Najee Johnson will be off the field against the Bills, but with Jalen Watson returning, he is likely to be knocked a peg down in the receiving order. So instead of covering wide receiver number 2, he'll be covering wide receiver number 3, etc. I don't dislike Najee Johnson. I think Najee Johnson is obviously an incredible athlete. I think he's a decent football player. He's just not a number 2 cornerback. We have learned that about him over the course of this season. That is unfortunate, but it's not entirely unthinkable. We kind of knew that, right? He was a 7th-round pick, just like Jalen Watson was, but Jalen Watson ascended the depth chart very early in his career, and his first game or his second game against the Chargers won the game with a 99-yard, 100-yard pick 6 versus Justin Sherbert over there in Los Angeles, and that has been his case since then. This is the first time Najee Johnson has been on the field in the capacity of defense in his entire career for this season. So, knocking him down a peg on that receiving order should do wonders, having Jalen Watson back, assuming that there are no difficulties with his injury after the game last week. I believe he played 40 snaps last week against our opponents, and he didn't look great, but he was okay. There's a big difference between looking okay and looking like Najee Johnson the last time the Chiefs played the Bills and giving up a perfect passer rating. So, moving on with the defensive backs, that very same game, here's the magic of Trent McDuffie. Trent McDuffie was targeted 4 times, gave up 1 completion for a single yard. Now, the air yards when targeted were -4, meaning that pass was a screen that he gave up. That was a Josh Allen takes a snap, throws a screen, it's a completion, it gets you 1 yard. You had to throw the receiver the ball 4 yards behind the line of scrimmage in order to get a completion against Trent McDuffie. Trent McDuffie yielded a 39.6 rating when targeted. That just goes to show you how good Trent McDuffie is. Justin Reed in that game was targeted 4 times, yielding 4 receptions for just 20 yards and an 87.5 rating when targeted. Not a terrible day for Justin Reed, but you knock down one of those passes, you're probably ending a drive. Chamari Connor was targeted 8 times, yielding 7 receptions for 51 yards, but only a 53.6 rating when targeted. So 7 receptions, 51 yards. You're dealing with quite a few dink and dunks at that point. There's not a whole lot you're going to do to stop that in the NFL unless you're Trent McDuffie. The next thing worth talking about here, Joe Thuney was playing left guard, and the left tackle position struggled versus the Bills the last time around. Mahomes was only sacked twice, but obviously this is an unofficial statistic, but he looked uncomfortable from the second quarter on. He wasn't just sitting there in the pocket. He was making poor decisions. He was making some off-the-mark throws, basically from the second quarter on. So having Joe Thuney out there at the left tackle position, unless they think someone offers a better... If DJ Humphries they think is finally limber enough to go out there and play left tackle, okay, maybe. But if not, you have Joe Thuney playing left tackle, who has looked better so far than any left tackle they've had over the past couple years. So that should help Mahomes finding his stride in the AFC Championship game. But I do believe the Bills are likely to get very, very aggressive because they've come up against Mahomes in the playoffs quite a few times, and it has not gone well for them. So if it goes poorly for them this time, I think they all kind of have in the back of their mind, this is going to be bad for us, right? This isn't going to be just we lost the season against Mahomes. This is going to be you can't get over the Mahomes hump. Goodbye. I think everyone's going to have that fear in the back of their mind. So I think they're likely to do things which are ill-advised, perhaps, things which are very, very aggressive, like rushing Mahomes an inordinate amount of time. So we'll see, but I think that's what's going to happen there. Mahomes, for his part on the day, had a very weird day, if you remember that game. 23 of 33 for just 196 yards, but he threw 3 touchdowns. But he threw 2 interceptions. And here's the thing with the interceptions. The first one, that first interception he threw in that game was a bad idea poorly executed. And if you have had to do anything in your life, at any point in your life, meaning if you've ever done anything, you know that a bad idea poorly executed always leads to disaster. It was just a terrible throw on every level. I'm not sure exactly. Sometimes he just puts those up there, right? But we'll get back to that in a moment. The second interception was with 1:07 left. They were down 2 scores, and it was a quasi-Hail Mary. It was like a 30-yard pass downfield, I think. And it was just slightly off mark. Over the course of that 20, 30 yards, that off mark grows a little bit, and someone else got his hands on the ball. Now, I say Mahomes does that sometimes. He does. Sometimes he just makes bad ideas and poorly executes them. He doesn't do it in the playoffs. There is no doubt in my mind Mahomes is going to play a much cleaner game against the Bills in the AFC Championship than he did against them during the regular season. Another note on this day, that one of the things that was so weird about this day, 11 players caught receptions. 11 players caught receptions. 7 players had multiple receptions. Now, I have said this for a long time on the channel. I think that is a sign, another sign, that the Chiefs were holding something back for the playoffs. Now, that doesn't make sense. How can you throw the ball to 11 players to get receptions, but you're holding something back? Isn't that opening the playbook up? Well, kind of. But here's the thing. The playoffs, what are they about? The playoffs are about big on big. The playoffs are about good on good. The playoffs are about one-on-one. When you are throwing the ball to 11 different players, that means you're not targeting your aces when you have to. That means you're throwing it to whoever willy-nilly. That's what was happening when the Chiefs completed passes to 11 different players. We saw this against the Texans just last week. Hollywood Brown, no receptions. DeAndre Hopkins, no receptions. That might seem to fly in the face of what I'm saying, but what it was you were playing big on big and targeting who was open. You weren't taking wild chances, saying, here's a YOLO ball to Travis Kelce because it's Travis Kelce. What you were doing is saying, here's the play as it's designed. There's option 1, option 2, option 3. Turns out that probably option 1 was Travis Kelce, option 2 was another receiver, option 3 was Xavier Worthy. 1 and 3 had pretty big days. That's, or not pretty big days, statistically fairly poor if you're looking at the second leading receiver on your team. But it does suggest that the plays being called were being called for the guys being targeted. So I think that if the Chiefs buckle it down versus the Bills, you're going to see more big on big, more good on good, and more one-on-one. Now, interestingly, the Buffalo Bills offense, one of the things that got me about that game, I was expecting the Buffalo Bills to be able to run the ball against the Kansas City Chiefs. I was just expecting it. You have to account for Josh Allen. I think that James Cook is a pretty decent running back. It didn't go well. This was a tale of two stats. The Bills could not run the ball. But when they did, they scored touchdowns. James Cook had 9 carries for 20 yards. That's a 2.2 yard average. 2.2 yard average is terrible. But he also had 2 rushing touchdowns. And his first, I think it was the first rushing touchdown, was like an 8-yard run. So that's almost half of his rushing yards on a touchdown run. Take that away, you're looking at a much worse statistical day. Even Bills fullback Josh Allen had a sub-5 yard average when carrying the ball. He ran the ball 12 times for 55 yards. Now, just sub-5 average, what's that, like a 4.6 yard average? A 4.6 yard average is pretty good, except when it's the guy who's not supposed to be carrying the football. When the element of surprise is on the quarterback's end and he's still only rushing for sub-5 yards, it is problematic. And here's the thing. That touchdown that he ran for was a 26-yard run, meaning that on his other 11 carries, he had 29 yards, which is a 2.6 yard average. The Bills were not able to get anything going on the ground against the Chiefs. The playoffs are about big on big, they're about good on good, they're about one-on-one, but there's two other things. Running the ball, sacking the quarterback. Now, the Chiefs did not sack Josh Allen in this game. We will overlook that. And funny note, I was rewatching the game and I was like, golly, George Karlaftis is putting the pressure on Josh Allen. What is going on here? Come to realize he was facing the Bills' backup right tackle. I forgot about the Bills' starting right tackle having been out that game, but did get a whole lot of push. So, and Trent McDuffie nearly had a sack. He was stiff-armed by Josh Allen because Josh Allen's a fullback. Where was I? What was I talking about? Oh, couldn't run the ball. I don't remember the point I was making. This is embarrassing. Oh, right. So you have to be able to run the ball in the playoffs, and a lot of that is about killing clock. A lot of being able to run the ball in the playoffs is about draining the clock after you've scored your points, and you think you're basically going in for the kill, right? Like you saw with the Texans in the opening round of the playoffs. They were able to drain the clock at the end of the game and won through basically just kneeling on their opponent's neck. And that was what happened in that game. That was how they closed that out. So, getting after the passer and running the ball, those are things that the Chiefs are going to have to look at. Now, the last thing to talk about is this. The Bills had 4 guys who had a pretty decent day catching passes. Khalil Shakir had 8 receptions for 70 yards. That was kind of average for his season. Curtis Samuel had 5 receptions for 58 yards. Amari Cooper had 2 receptions for 55 yards. and Dawson Knox had 4 receptions for 40 yards. None of those guys had outstanding days, but they all had pretty good days. 2 things to take into account when looking at these statistics, however: Jaylen Watson did not play that game. So everything you have Trent McDuffie covering the number 1 wide receiver. You're taking him out of the game. Your number 2 wide receiver in this game was being covered by Najee Johnson. No longer is that the case. Now it's Jaylen Watson. Jaylen Watson's substantially better at playing cornerback than is Najee Johnson. So everything gets knocked down a peg. Also worth noting, in that game, Jaden Hicks played just 12 snaps of defense. Jaden Hicks, at that time, was still limited in the defensive landscape for the Kansas City Chiefs. Wasn't playing a whole lot of defense. Wasn't getting out there. Wasn't getting looks. Now he is. Jaden Hicks is a preeminent part of the defense for the Kansas City Chiefs now, and he's playing very well. So these 2 players added back to that lineup could mean good things. Also, worth noting, Jaylen Watson is better against the run than any cornerback on the Kansas City Chiefs besides Trent McDuffie. Jaden Hicks is an absolute thumper in the running game, and he's able to make wide receivers afraid too. Now, the Chiefs do have a number of safeties that are able to make wide receivers afraid to catch the football. They have a whole lot of guys back there, Justin Reed and Brian Cook, who do like to knock people out. And Shamari Connor's a pretty big hitter when he gets an opportunity as well. So I don't know that he brings that as an added element over the other safeties, but I do think he's better against the pass than the other safeties have been. He's certainly a ball hawk. He's certainly someone who is willing to take a chance, and so far we've seen those chances pay off. Anyway, guys, those are 6 notes that I have for the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Buffalo Bills for the second time this week, or this season. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other Kansas City Chiefs fans. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, the Chiefs are the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week, and I hope to have you back for the next one.